And I think I forgot to ask before, what's your own personal trajectory? Take us from college to where you are now.
Sure. I initially studied computer science in college, and I got so upset at late night debugging sessions, especially back in the day when I had to sit in a computer lab to get time on the computer. And, you know, like most students, I might have once in a while let my assignments slip until like the night before they were due. And sitting in front of the computer trying to find that silly error that won't let this program compile led me to believe, well, I really liked biology in high school. Maybe I'll forget this and start doing some biology. So I wound up studying biology, but always having that computer science background. It makes things really easy. Once you learn how to write a little bit of code, I'm of the generation where I learned a lot of Python. I'm sorry, a lot of Perl. Now everyone's learning Python, and it was really fun to say, well, this is this thing I have to do over and over again. Why don't I just spend some time writing the code that'll make it easier to do for data analysis, etc. But then I went to graduate school. I actually studied plant biology in graduate school because when you have to extract DNA, I was a molecular geneticist, and when you have to study DNA, plants don't scream. And I did a lot of work on tomatoes, and I eat tomatoes to this day. I have no problem with that. I actually wound up leaving graduate school and getting a job here in Boston, and I worked for a number of startup companies. So one was based in Heidelberg, Germany, and here in Cambridge, and we were annotating. This is when the human genome was just being completed in the very early 2000s, and we were trying to find particular gene signatures. So we were using computer science and writing code to try to find things that might be a target for a potential therapeutic area. From there, I actually had an interesting little turn where I started to do pre-sales. So we were trying to sell this solution that we had built to other companies. And I would be the technical guy who would be like, all right, so we're going to talk to Monsanto today. Okay, Monsanto, a plant science company. I will show an example of what our software can do on plants. And after a while of doing that, I realized that I was always with the sales guy, and the sales guy drove a really nice car, and I had a hunk of junk. And I was wondering, maybe I should try this sales thing. So for a while, I did sales for a couple of different startup companies, and then I found out that sales is a very, very fun, very challenging, and very interesting career, but I liked the technical part better. So I wound up doing pre-sales again, and I worked for a number of companies until I had the best title of my career. I was the vice president of disruptive innovation at Thomson Reuters. And to this day, my wife still says, "What did you do there again? Because I don't understand what disruptive innovation could possibly entail."
And that's a great title, though.
Yeah, it was fun. I got to meet a lot of people because of the title.
It's ready for a TED Talk anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And then I worked for a couple of other companies, including, which is great. One of the things I've really appreciated about my less than linear career is that every new skill you learn adds to the repertoire of things you can do. Because I worked in an environment where we were selling software to different pharmaceutical companies, I got to meet a whole bunch of people who are now my peers at just other companies. And we still get together for, the proverbial coffee or whatever to talk about what's going on in our industries. And so for a while I worked for a genetic testing laboratory. So people who take your blood and run analyses, and we did some really cool science with them. And then I worked as a consultant for a while, and then I joined Sanofi about 3 years ago.
Excellent. Right. That's fascinating, I think.
Well, it's fun. It's fun to have multiple ways of looking at the world. So I think it's beneficial.
Absolutely. And I talk to hundreds of employers per year, and one thing that just keeps coming out loud and clear is the magic really happens when people can combine 2 or 3 or 4 different skill sets.
Absolutely. That's why at my advanced age I'm learning how to play guitar, just because I want to keep the brain going.
That's good too.
So what words of advice do you have for high school or college students that might want to do what you're doing now?
There are a lot of things. One is Well, if you have an interest in computer science, that's great. If you want to write code, because there is a difference between a programmer and a computer scientist. So let's say if you like to program, um, there are more. We will never run out of things that we could we will never run out of problems that we need to use computation to solve. The biology is incredibly difficult. It's really hard to figure out. It's if it were easy to find a cure for things, we'd have them. There's the challenge is trying to understand enough about how the body works and how different people have different genes, or different variations of those genes, and how does that affect your how a disease presents itself in you. So as I said earlier, like, pay attention in math class. Try to, I know once in a while it's hard, and you wonder to yourself, when am I ever going to use geometry? You need geometry when you grow. You really do. Especially if you want to be a video game programmer, like we were talking about and before we started this thing. You have to know that Mario is made up of little blocks, and those blocks are moving across the screen. But seriously, a good understanding of math. What computer language that's not that important to most people, I think, in my field. As long as you know how to do a thing, that's important. Because unlike learning spoken or written languages, human languages, computer languages are all similar enough that if you get really proficient in understanding why you're doing what you're doing, if you understand how the different data structures work, etc., there are similar data structures across the different. So between Java and C and Python, etc., you have to learn the new syntax, right? You have to learn how that language is spoken, but the basic understanding comes from a thorough understanding of how programming really works.
Right. Even though you can't write it, you might be able to read it.
Exactly. And then, of course, for data science is applied math and statistics at the end of the day. So having a really good understanding of how statistics works, and doing things like taking, there are a lot of online courses to do things like how to use a Jupyter notebook or how to use R, two of the bigger languages that are popular for doing data science itself. Those would be things that I would definitely look at. And of course, if you're going to work in the life sciences, even though we said you can probably learn a lot of it on the job, so to speak, having make sure you know what a gene is.
Right.
And have some understanding of having some of that understanding is great, but a lot of both sides of that coin, to our point earlier, can be taught, right? You can learn on the job, so to speak, right? Like, as we start thinking about this summer potentially getting some internships opened up, we have a huge number of projects where we want to have people, a colleague of mine's term for this is hands-on keyboards, people who aren't making PowerPoints or playing with Excel, to your point earlier, but are actually sitting down and saying, okay, here's a problem, here's how we think we're going to solve it, but we need you to actually implement it, and learning like that. There are other people that would talk about things like find a GitHub project, like a publicly available one, especially one in the sciences. And if you'd like, after this, we can follow up and I could send you some examples. But take a look at some of those and say, how can I contribute? And because that's hard to do, because you have to learn what it does, and then try to say, how can I make it better? Because people are always asking for feature requests for new applications. Yeah, those are some of the ways to get started. And the best way is, the best way to learn anything is by doing. So, and that's very, very true in bioinformatics or the whole informatics for life sciences in general. Is there's a lot of public data available, and if you can find someone who you can reach out to, and I'd be happy to reach out to people, just feel free to reach out. We can show some examples of things that you might want to try to do and on your own personal laptop at home, and eventually you can use like a free Amazon or a free Google account and see if you can't do it on the cloud. Because moving forward, it's going to be all cloud all the time, and that's going to be a very important thing to remember, because it is a bit of a change in mindset. And again, I made some jokes about how old I am, but as we are working with our own colleagues about putting things on the cloud, a lot of people are thinking of things in the wrong frame, right? That mental model really has to change to go from this works on a relational database that sits in a data center that I can basically see from my office to we don't really need to do this in a relational database, do we? We can just put this on the cloud, and we can use different cloud modalities to try to solve problems.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and there's a ton of online stuff available now. I mean, it's impressive. As you know, a lot of my own colleagues are finding things on Udemy and Coursera, et cetera, edX, to learn on their own for low cost or nothing. And that's with the current situation, a lot of people are spending a lot of time doing that. And I think it's one of the benefits of, if we're going to be positive, I think it's one of the benefits of our current situation.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think remote work and remote classes are, they've been there for a long time, but a lot of employers especially haven't really fully embraced them. And now, having been forced to embrace them, I don't think there's going to be ever going back to the way things used to be.
Nope, I agree. It's going to be a lot of online experiences, and maybe that's okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.